You are listening to ArtFreaks. My name's Daniel Crossan. I'm an artist based in London. I'll be sitting down with a variety of creative people to find out why they make the things they make and what lessons they've learned along the way that will help you impact the world with your creativity. Today we are joined by Anthony Hurd. Based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Anthony is a multidisciplinary artist who now primarily focuses on painting. Anthony's journey takes a ton of interesting turns, with skateboarding and punk DIY culture leading later on to 20 years experience in the advertising industry. Anthony offers us a unique perspective on how the continuous application of one's creativity can evolve into a simple yet fulfilling daily creative practice. Their story serves as an inspiring call to follow our intuition, leading with vulnerability and authenticity. Recently, Anthony's work has ventured into uncharted territory, purposefully aiming to provide a previously unseen representation of queer romance, a dream their inner child has held for a very long time. Today's podcast explores a wide range of topics from spirituality, cults, NFTs to parenthood, but perhaps most importantly, our conversation encourages introspection regarding our own creative output and its potential to fill our inner child with feelings of pride. Here is Anthony Hurd. I know that you had a you had a very difficult start as a child. I was wondering if you could talk about what life was like growing up in Kansas City.
When you're in it, you don't know you're in it. It wasn't until I was out of it that I fully understood what I was going through. I grew up with two parents that were both drug addicts. My parents got divorced when I was like 6 or 7. And I didn't see much of my dad for a considerable amount of time. My brother has Tourette's and my sister has cystic fibrosis. And it just was a very chaotic environment. And a lot of that spurred my interest in art because I was looking for any way out of it. And when I realized I was good at it, that's what I pursued because I thought, well, maybe this is my ticket out of this mess that I was in.
Did you become good at art by using it as an escape, by jumping into sketchbooks or pads of paper and having that time to kind of withdraw? Were you using it to withdraw at all, or was it just that one thing of like, people tell me I'm good at this, I'm going to follow that?
There's a little bit of both because it was a way for me to escape, and it was like time to myself, and it was a good way for me to kind of like internalize my experiences. But at the same time, it was kind of a social tool because I was known at a very early age as someone who is good at drawing, and I sold I would sit in class rather than do my homework. I would draw album art and like sell them to kids in the hallways for like $2, or skateboard graphics or like whatever. It was like it ended up being a tool in many different ways because those expressions and those ways of like selling it and all that made me think, oh, I can actually make like a few bucks off this. I can actually do something with art. And that expanded in a lot of different ways because it wasn't just physical art. It wasn't just drawing. I ended up like taking a home ec class, and I made clothing, and I sold clothing to kids in school, and I sold them at the local skate shops. And I cut some of my friends' hair. I like anything that I could think of that was creative and that I could just jump into. I found some way to utilize that and make a buck. It's like we were extremely poor, so we grew up on food stamps and government assistance. And when the school would collect food and clothing for the poor people, like I'm literally wearing the clothes to school that other kids donated. I learned to sew so that I could change the clothes so that they didn't look like the things that the other kids had just donated. It gave me a lot of different tools, and still to this day, I still find new ways to utilize that.
In terms of kind of that time of like making clothes and cutting hair and and just sort of jumping into everything. Was that when you sort of discovered the punk scene and kind of the DIY aspects of that, or was that a little bit before you were still doing that kind of stuff?
No, it was about the same time. I started skateboarding when I was 10, and the DIY aspect probably came a few years later, when I started playing in straight edge hardcore bands, and we would make zines with our friends, and it was all cut and paste, photocopied at the local Kinkos. And then I slowly, in high school, I started to learn more about graphic design and some of the computer courses I was like forced to take. That gave me even more tools and allowed me to do a lot more. And it allowed me to like have a life in my early 20s and 30s and pursue advertising and like actually make money for myself. And so a lot of my creative and artistic things were very practical. For me, they were great. I got to express myself. I got to do the things that I love to do. I got to pursue it, but I always kind of found a way to like make money off of it because I had to make a living. And from a very early age, I was like the parent in my household and I had to take care of things. And so every artistic avenue that I pursued had to have some venue of
income,
paying my bills. Yeah.
You said you had to take care of things. Did you mean that you had to take care of other people as well as yourself, being the child in the family?
Yeah. When you live in a household with addiction, especially if it's gone pretty far, you end up being the caretaker, and it's a role that children shouldn't have to assume. But there were definitely many years where I did most of the cooking and the cleaning and taking care of my brother and sister, and most of the time taking care of my mother herself because she was just kind of locked in her room and only came out to do what she needed to do. So you take on that role at an early age. 50 years later, I'm still trying to like get rid of that mentality.
Yeah, the caregiver.
I mean, and I had a lot of selfish, indulgent times in the midst of that. I still found a way to like be a child, get in trouble, do the things that I wasn't supposed to do. But there was definitely just a lot of responsibility that was on me.
Did that lead to like a rebellious side or sort of any acting out or were you like nailing it at school and then coming home and taking care of people and making money with art? And
no, I was horrible at school.
Okay.
I was like, I barely made it through school. I don't know if it's because of art in itself. Art was like, no one taught me. I could pick up a book, or I could pick up a pencil, I could pick up a sewing machine. Someone could give me the bare bones minimum of like how this thing operates. And then it was fully up to me to decide what I did with it. And with school, that's not really allowed. The way that schools are structured is it just was really difficult for me to wrap my head around. I'm still to this day, if I want to learn something, I will pick up a book and I will go to the index and I will look up exactly what I want to learn. And then I'll go to that page, or I will search online for the exact thing that I need to, understand before I dive into something. So school was extremely difficult for me, just the actual process of learning. I transferred to a arts magnet school in ninth grade. That was pretty fantastic for me because it had the facilities that were much more engaging for me artistically.
It's like an art-focused school, right? Yeah.
High school, yeah, it's an art-focused high school. And for the most part, they seem to see that I don't learn the way they want me to, and they just let me do what I needed to do. It didn't benefit me very well academically because I probably didn't learn anything in any of my academic classes. Most of my teachers just kind of like let me slide and get through. Being an inner city school, there was a lot of violence and there was bomb threats and fights and gang activity and all kinds of things going on. So a kid not paying attention in class was not the highest priority. And I learned there that if I'm just kind of like quiet and don't cause problems, then I will get through school okay. Outside of school was different because I did get in a lot of trouble and I didn't seek it out. But I kind of fell into a group of friends who were into a lot of illegal shit. I had a friend, he got arrested for 44 counts of grand theft auto, and his way of coping with that was to tell the cops on every person that was ever involved in everything that ever happened. So he ended up getting probably 45, 50 other people arrested in the process. And I was one of them. And my actual involvement was minimal in terms of the creations of the crime, but I definitely was doing things I was not supposed to be doing. At 17, I ended up getting arrested, and I spent a little bit of time in jail. It was literally like 3 days.
Okay.
It's what they call shock time. It's like to scare underage kids.
Did it work?
And it did work. And it didn't work in the way that they probably thought, because shock time, I think it's because they want the violence and the scary parts of jail or prison to scare them. But what scared me the most was being idle, like being in a place without a pencil and paper and without being able to learn or draw or pursue the creative things that I wanted to do was the most like poignant lessons for me. When I got out, I was just like, I'm never going back there. There's no way I'm ever going back there. And so, getting arrested was probably one of the best things that happened to me as a teenager, because it made me shift what I was doing. And I was on probation for 5 years after that. So I had to basically get all new friends. You can't be around other people on probation, and everybody I knew got arrested. So we were not allowed to be around each other or to do anything with each other. So I changed my life considerably through that process. And, still to this day, I'm pretty happy that happened.
And how did you sort of start with new friends and move away from the bad crowd? Did you is that around the time when you were in bands and hardcore bands and stuff?
It was before. Actually, the person that I was hanging out with that was causing most of the trouble, he had taught me how to play guitar. And we weren't in a band. We were just we would fool around and just jam with some people, and didn't record anything, didn't ever try to be a band. At that point, I had to move out of my mother's house, and I moved in with my father, who I hadn't seen in I don't know how long. So it was a different city, a different suburb of Kansas City. And I just went out skateboarding, and I met other kids in the area where I was that skated, and I hung out with them. And one of them ended up being a straight edge kid, and I didn't even know what the fuck that was. I never heard of it. But I was like, well, shit, I'm on probation. I can't do drugs.
This kind of is a good fit.
So this kind of works out. That wasn't really the case for my old group of friends. So it was a really good, safe place. Like I fell into this circle of people who went out of their way not to do drugs, and yet they still skateboarded, and they were into music and all these things. And so I ended up playing bass for like 2 or 3 different straight edge hardcore bands, just through that circle.
Around that time, you began to open up regarding your identity and sexuality. How did things change at that time? And in relation to our conversation and where it's going with your newer work, was there a freedom that came with taking that step towards expressing yourself more authentically?
Yeah, I knew I was queer probably 2nd or 3rd grade. as soon as I learned what it was. And I didn't understand it in like a sexual way. It was just purely like the bare bones of it. I knew I was different, and I knew that I felt different around people, and I just knew. And so, but I also knew that it was a bad thing. You know, I grew up in the church. You know, I learned that I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to, have a hard life. I'm possibly going to die of AIDS. There was just like this pile of negativity on top of it. But at the same time, I knew that's what I was. And so I kind of, probably about the age of 9 or 10, I just decided, like, well, suck it up. It's going to suck for like the next 8 or 9 years till I get out of high school. And then my goal from probably 10 years old was, well, I will go to college, and I will go to college in like New York or San Francisco or somewhere where I can come out. And, at that point I'd already decided, like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to burn in hell, because I can't not be me. I can't not be who I feel like I am. I've tried, and that's not working. And so I applied to schools. I got accepted. I got scholarships, but I didn't get a full ride. Like, I think I had a 75% offer at SVA in New York, but I couldn't take on that other 25%. So I just decided to stay in Kansas City and come out. It was like super scary, but there's there's such a big release of just kind of saying fuck you, and just like putting it all out there and just letting all the cards fall where they fall. And I hurt some people in the process. I got hurt in the process. At that point, I changed my circle of friends a few times. I wasn't disconnected from the other people, but I was living with a couple different There were graffiti artists. One of them was a DJ. One of them had local magazine that was like a hip hop and art focused magazine. And I was living with them at the time. I had kind of been experimenting with the queer community, and I was sneaking into gay bars and things like that. And then when I got to the point to tell my roommates, they were all like kind of a little shocked, but then they were all really cool about it. There was no issues with any of it. It was more that, like, for me personally, my focus totally shifted. I wasn't looking for distractions or things to keep me busy and keep me away from, my queerness. So for the next few years, I just I worked in gay restaurants. I worked in gay bars. I kind of threw myself into this world, and that really separated me from a lot of my old friends. It was kind of like with art. Like, I always just kind of dive into everything, and I don't leave a lot of room for anything else. And so I fully dove into this, and I didn't really leave very much room for anything else.
It would be something that you had wanted for a long time, and then, now you were finally able to kind of, I don't know. I don't like saying the word tribe. That's not the right word, but you found people that were like you, that didn't make you feel alone, basically.
I still felt pretty alone because there was such a cultural difference between me and most everyone that I would meet in those communities.
Okay.
Because coming from skateboarding and, playing in hardcore straight edge bands and, being an artist and the things that I was interested in literally did not exist in anyone that I met in the gay scene. No one. There was like one person I met who was like kind of into the punk scene, but I think they were more into it like aesthetically, like they wanted to look like a punk. I didn't really have a whole lot of experience in that world. And that was interesting, but it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles where I actually met people that I fully connected with. And it was like, queer punk kids from like all these different scenes. And then there was all these like cool clubs and, just that's like when the world really opened up for me. And I realized that like there was a place for all of my weirdness in the world. And, I met other gays that skateboarded and, it's just, that was a really exciting time in my life. I probably felt the most like authentically me in like my early 20s, like moving to LA and just kind of being poor and living. Just like,
And what did you do in LA to survive? Were you still making art a lot at this time? Is that when you kind of got into the advertising scene?
I wasn't making a lot of art. I was drawing, I was doing things. I didn't really understand how the art world worked yet, or even how to be involved in that. The people that I lived with and some of the people that were like kind of in my circle were really into the whole Tom of Finland scene. And they introduced me to Dirk, and who was running the foundation. And there was like a brief moment where I thought, well, maybe I'll, draw erotic art and, try to get into this scene. But as I attended more events and things, I just it didn't feel like a very good place for me. And so I ended up, I was a manager at a gay bathhouse out in North Hollywood. And I just kind of just lived my life. I was just surviving and enjoying myself. And like you said, I had really gotten free of like so many responsibilities. And I fell into some really, really good situations. Like within a few months of living there, I got this apartment. It was in the back of a house in Hollywood Hills. It was just like some random guy I met at a bar. He was telling me about how he has a place for rent. And I'm like, sure. And I go look at it. It's just like amazing mid-century home with like views from Malibu to Long Beach. And it was like $400 a month for like a studio 1-bedroom apartment with, this giant balcony and a swimming pool and koi pond and all this stuff. And so I just kind of felt like there was no problems.
Yeah. I'll stay here a little bit, just for a few weeks.
That only lasted a year. He ended up wanting to sell the house after that. And at that point I was dating somebody. And so I ended up moving in with him. But shortly after that, I had went through, I got out of the bathhouse. So that part was a really hard scene for me because there's just a lot that goes on there. And there's a lot of drug addiction. So I got out of that and I ended up working at a handful of different jobs, but then I ended up working at Kinko's. And I don't know if you guys know what Kinko's is, but
we have similar things here, but like photocopy shops, right?
Yeah. Well, they have like a full service computer department in there as well. And so they do resumes and they do some light graphic design and, all this stuff. So I got a job at Kinko's. And at the time they had like 3 people in their full service department. And within like 3 months, I was the only person. Like I took the place of 3 people, because I could do everything that they were all doing. And so I was like running the full service department and I was doing all this graphic design work. And it was all like pretty basic shit, but it helped me build my portfolio up enough. And then this was like during the .com era, 1999. And I got a job at like some random .com where they wanted you to work like 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And it was like a shit job. It was shit pay. It was shit hours. But again, I only had to work there for about, 6 months. And it built my portfolio up. And then I was able to like get real jobs in the advertising industry. And I ended up doing that for many years. I went off and I was a partner in 2 different design firms myself. And I worked with every major brand and all the local movie studios and music studios. And from there, I freelanced for 14 years. I was a concept artist, and I basically just worked on sales pitches. I would help whatever studio I'm working with develop ideas to win the job, and then they would basically produce the job for whatever it was. For most of my 20s, I didn't paint at all.
Were you enjoying that work, in advertising, and of all of those kind of stages, what were the kind of things that you remember fondly?
I thought it would be good for me. I thought like it's a creative outlet. It requires a lot of actual thought that goes into the process of, how to do this. But it ended up being pretty toxic for me. It's like a lot of bro culture. It's really long hours. It's really demanding. It became really stressful for me. What I thought would be a good place for my creative outlet was not. It was like you're just constantly being crushed. It was like, you're always dumbing down your ideas for the final product. And so I ended up feeling really dissatisfied, but and that's not the experience for everybody. Some people just really enjoy it, and they're able to like relax and not take things so seriously, but that's just not me. In the freelance process, I had kind of worked it out to where I could start painting more, and I only had to work for like a week or two each month to pay the bills because the money was good in advertising. And that's what made it so hard to get out of it, was that the money was good.
And was it something you missed? Was painting something that you kind of kept thinking, this summer I'm going to get back on it? Or was it just something that you were just not thinking about because you just your creativity was sort of being fed to this machine that was just filtering out all of the kind of motivation to kind of create things, to express yourself?
Yeah, I was exhausted creatively. So that wasn't like on my mind at all. When I started the second company with my business partner, Mike, it freed up a lot of time because from the very beginning, we were both like, okay, we want lives. So it's just the two of us. We're not going to take on more work than we can do. We're not going to, grow and expand real quickly like we did last time. And so I ended up with like a lot more time on my hands, and I was a lot less stressed creatively. And then he was getting married, and I wanted to do something special for a wedding gift. And I thought, I'll paint a picture. I hadn't painted in 10 years. So I did that. And then that just kind of tumbled into the next thing. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't really have like a clear direction on the type of work that I wanted to create. I just jumped in. Yeah.
And you weren't thinking of galleries or shows or anything like this. You were creating for the sake of like, I enjoyed that, making that one painting. I'm going to make another painting, and then I'm going to make another painting, and just kind of roll with it very organically.
I smoked a lot of pot back then. And it was like the best thing for me to just like get high and just go crazy on details. I literally was doing these pointillism abstracts where there's just like billions of dots, and it would take me months and months to do these projects. I didn't care because I had income coming in. I didn't care about art shows. I didn't care about any of that. I just really enjoyed creating it. So I've just, have this big piece of wood, and I'd hang it on the wall, and I'd take it off the wall whenever I wanted and work on it for 5 or 6 hours, and then put it back up on the wall. And
it's quite meditative, that kind of process of just going over and over something like that. It's quite meditative. In university, I got into a habit of like, I guess there was even like an addictive kind of side to it. I know people don't relate addiction to weed or marijuana, but there was a point at university where it was like I was like, okay, I think it's like getting dark now. I think I can sort of start.
Yeah.
And I was there to make art, so to get stoned to make art was kind of goes hand in hand. And I'd get lost on the details, and I'd be up all night. I'd be up until 2 or 3, maybe 4. It would just be so tranquil, and I'd put on some nice music, and the time would just like sort of stand still, and I would get lost in the process, and it was amazing. And often I would wake up and be like, yeah, it's not that good.
No, you look at it the next day and you're like, what the fuck?
You're like, oh shit, I thought that was my best piece ever.
Yeah, there was definitely many times where, there was definitely still me in it, and you can look back at it and people are like, whoa, that's crazy. But, it's still kind of shit work. Like, there's no meaning to any of it. It was literally just a place for me to like dump myself for hours at a time.
Yeah, that served a good purpose, I imagine, at that time as well, and get you into something I think's very important, which is just turning up to practice, just practicing, having a routine where you kind of have, like you say, this wood on the wall that you can take down, like a space in your house that's dedicated to it, something where you're committing yourself in a kind of not massive way, but just a regular way. I think it's very important at the beginning of like trying to be like, okay, I'm going to take this a bit more seriously.
Everything happened the way it was supposed to. It's I hate saying that, and I hate hearing that when someone says that. You're sitting there like grieving or going through something shitty, and they're just like, they say something like that, like,
Yeah.
oh, everything happened for a reason. It sounds horrible, and it's probably the worst thing you can say to a person when they're going through shit. But after the math, God, is so true. It sucks. It was necessary. It had to happen the way that it happened. And, for me, at this point, I had left Los Angeles. I was living in Palm Springs. I was still freelancing, doing my work. I was doing this, super stoner art and just working on my own stuff. And in 2007, my sister died. And that wrecked me. It just, like, for 2 years, I was an absolute disaster. I don't even remember most of it. It was, probably like, it was definitely the first of many major things that happened to me in my adulthood that changed the direction of my life. She had cystic fibrosis. So, we knew that there was a time limit. When she was 10, her friends in therapy that also had cystic fibrosis, they were dying. So, at 10, we were like, maybe we have till 15. At 15, we were like, maybe we have till she's 20. And by the time she was in her mid 20s, you start to kind of forget about the impermanence of her life. She had a couple of scares, and in the process of her scares, she had written letters to all of her brothers, sisters, mom, whatever. And so after she passed, I received this letter from her husband that she had written for me, and we were very close, but in my kind of like selfish exploration of my adult life and just going out and being responsibility free and whatever, I didn't keep up with anybody. We would talk on the phone like every couple months or so, but she was very proud of me. And like, I wasn't even very proud of myself. It was just, my life was just kind of this perpetual motion. And so I just kept the motion going forward. And in her note, she wrote that she's very proud of me and that she loves me. And, but the whole experience made me think that I'm just like wasting my life. Like, doing advertising, doing work that I'm not. I drank a lot. I was a big drinker. My partner at the time was a bartender for 10 years. Our whole social circle revolved around bars and clubs and alcohol. I indulged in all of those things for like a solid 2 years after my sister died because I was just grieving. But as I started to come out of it, like those words stuck with me more than anything about her being proud. And I don't know why. Even years later, I ended up getting it tattooed on my arm just because it was like a good reminder for me to look at, and it's in her handwriting. But that was like the thing that triggered me to start taking art seriously.
So you're in LA and you're now painting, and now what happens? You're stepping away from freelancing. I know that you contacted everybody and said, "I'm going to give this a go." Like, just don't contact me for work or something.
That was later. Okay, so I went from LA to Palm Springs. I was in Palm Springs when my sister passed. I stayed there for a couple more years and wallowed in my grief and alcoholism and all these things. And then it was like 2009 or something. Everybody was talking about 2012, the end of the world.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
The end of the world was coming. I was like, shit, I should probably prepare something for that. So I went down this total culty, spiritual, weird rabbit hole for a short period of time. I was reading all these things from Trumvalo Melchizedek, who I just think is a fucking nutcase at this point. But it was like the beginning of QAnon, because all the conspiracies that exist now in QAnon have been within the spiritual communities for decades.
And what can you speak a little bit about that person you just talked about? Because I didn't know who they were. I would have an awareness of some of those people, but not that person.
He he's part of the thing that they call Flower of Life organization, and they teach people how to create merkabas around their body. It's like an energetic field that's made out of a star tetrahedron, and it was like a 21-step process, and you had to pay him like $700 to have him teach you in this class. And then there was all these different tiers to it, which is always super culty. I didn't go to any of the classes. What I did was I read his books, and I found somebody who told me what the rest of the steps were, because you had to pay to get those.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just kind of went on my own tangent of exploring these things. And in the process, I had moved to Sedona, Arizona, which is like culty spiritual central. It's like where all the vortices are and all the aliens come. And it was pretty cool for me, honestly, because I did take a big step back from my work. I did continue to do freelance work, but it was super minimal. I say that I got involved in this like culty spiritual world, but I didn't actually get involved. I just read all about it, and I experienced my own, meditations and my own experiences and my own things. And I met people that were really interesting who kind of helped me steer clear of the mainstream cult parts of that stuff. I'm pretty good at seeing through that. Anytime I would enter a circumstance or a group, and they were, and someone says, "You need me to get there," I'm like, "No, this is wrong. This doesn't work."
Did you get anything beneficial from that time? Do you feel like you carried anything from that? Have you like remained spiritual in any way, or like do you still meditate, or is there anything that you've taken with you?
I definitely have maintained a lot of things, and it did teach me a lot of things. It taught me a lot about just like listening to myself. Spirituality has always been there for me, but it comes and goes. It's waves. It's like everything else. I had some experiences years later that were pretty life-changing for me. And at this point, I don't even talk about the details of it, because I feel like when I express something like that too many times, it's like every time I say it, it like lessens the actual experience a little bit. And but I can say that it was very enlightening. It wasn't drug induced. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't any kind of weird thing going on. It was just I was going through a really rough patch in my life, and I put these energies out there that I needed help, and I feel that I received that help. It was kind of a blessing and a curse because I feel like I experienced enlightenment for like 2 months, where everything that I was worried about and everything that I was experiencing and everything that was making my life difficult, and it all just went away in like the blink of an eye. I had an experience in my dreams and I woke up like healed.
Fucking hell.
And then after a couple of months, it started to kind of fade. And I went down this horrible anxiety rabbit hole of chasing it because it felt so good, and it felt so like it was just like everything made sense. Like I just could, I never had such clarity, man, my whole entire life as I did in those like couple of months. I still have many enlightening experiences, but at this point, I think I have grasped the fact that enlightenment is not something you live in.
Yeah.
It's an experience you have, and you can have it multiple times, but it's not a thing to chase. You know, it's not a thing. It's you don't get to live in the light. you know, you can make conscious decisions to be positive and all these things, but you don't get to just live there.
It's interesting because often the people that get into the chasing of enlightenment are people that have kind of addictive personalities. So when they have an experience that feels euphoric in a very pure way, where they feel like they've had a spiritual moment, they chase it again and again, or they chase a deeper amount of it. So it's like 20 minutes meditation twice a day has shown, like, over the course of 3 months, then I feel something's happened. Now I need to meditate an hour a day, twice a day. And then it's like, shit, I need to, now I need to get to that place where the monks are and not speak for 2 months. And then it's where's the end of it? You're not going to like, the end of it maybe is you becoming the next Buddha and, having a following of people that you sort of help reach enlightenment. That's kind of unrealistic. That's probably not going to happen. Where's the end,
You have a lot of realizations along the way. Because I remember living in Sedona, and I mean, some of the people are like batshit crazy there. Like they really, it goes to real extremes. And it was something along I think it was actually when 2012 hit. I had let go of the idea. I didn't think the world was going to end. I didn't think that, everything was going to disappear. I was super interested in all the conspiracies and the theories of what this was going to be. I mean, this person, Dromvalo, was saying like we were going to go into like 5 days of darkness, and we were moving into a new reality, and we would manifest everything instantly. But if you're not perfectly prepared, you're going to like manifest all your fears and you're going to die, and all these things. So there's just like all this crazy fear driven stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like super into Art Bell and listening to all these things. Just this is like pre Ancient Aliens, pre like a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what it made me realize was like, I can't live this way. Like you can't live in these conspiracies. You can't spend all your time preparing for something that doesn't happen. It was like, oh, well, if it fucking happens, it happens. And if the end of the world comes, it's like side tangent. But like when I see doomsday preppers and all this stuff, people like preparing for the end of the world, or zombie apocalypse or whatever. It's like, I don't want to be here
If it
through that.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
take me with you,
Yeah.
because I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in that apocalyptic, experience that every movie shows.
Yeah.
That there's nothing appealing about that for me.
No, that
Um,
is literally hell.
I'm not preparing to live beyond this.
Yeah.
It's
How did you gain clarity from that rabbit hole? What was there a moment that you can identify as being like or was it a slow movement? Was there a big moment where you were like, okay, I'm out?
it was kind of slow, but I watched a couple people that I knew go down this hole themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and the patterns were so similar
Yeah.
that it was impossible for me not to see myself in them and watch them do this and go, oh fuck, that's what I did, that's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a few of these people like ruin their lives,
Yeah.
like give everything away and be totally broke, and feel like that they are these reincarnated higher beings, and that they're going to teach the world, and they're going to harbor in some new age of peace. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, you can't step in necessarily in those situations, because the more you sort of talk to somebody that's in that mindset, the more you're sort of validating or like separating yourself from them. So it's like, this is ludicrous means, oh, you're like against me, or you haven't seen the light yet. And it's just like, there's no talking to people that live in a different reality. And I remember a friend of mine that I worked with when I worked in the umbrella shop a few years ago, and he was saying, like, I started speaking to somebody else who just expressed a few things where you're like, oh, like, that's interesting. Just wearing their political views and conspiracy theories on their sleeve in a very casual conversation that didn't need it. So you're like, oh, okay, you're in that kind of way of thinking. Interesting. And I was like, I thought about like pushing him a little bit further, like pushing against it a little bit further, but I just thought there's 0 point, because I'm not going to be able to change the guy's mind. I'm basically going to ruin the relationship that I have with him. And I don't want to offend him. I don't want it to call him, a crazy loony, even if I think it. And he said, look, there is no talking. The issue, one of the issues we've got at the moment is the polarization of everybody. The division of everybody is just leading to these two separate realities where there is sort of like no talking to the other side on both extreme sides of the conversation. And he just said, you would have been wasting your time. He lives in a different reality. And I just remember that clicking with me. And I thought, yeah, of course. And I've been down numerous rabbit holes, conspiratorial stuff and new agey spiritual stuff. And it's not like you're not listening. It's just that you feel empowered to the point where, why would you let go of that empowerment? Why would you let go of, like, you're powered up? You've leveled up. You're going Super Saiyan.
When you find that information, it feels hidden.
Yes.
It's not mainstream. So you feel like you're and this is the whole QAnon thing too, because it feels hidden. I mean, now it's huge, but when people first started finding it, it was hidden. It was information that the rest of the world didn't have. And so when you first start learning about these, spiritual practices and the conspiracies and all the things that are involved with that. And when I say conspiracies, I don't even mean that they don't exist.
Yeah, right.
I just mean that no one knows. And that's where I go for most of the things that I don't understand in my life is maybe it does. Maybe it's real. But can I spend all my time worrying about it? No. But I really had a lot of experiences, both personally, me going through it, and then other people doing it to me, of spiritual superiority. I have knowledge that you do not have, and you need it. It's hard to, everybody goes through it. Christianity goes through it all the fucking time because they think that they have the answer and we just are too ignorant to understand it.
My favorite thing about people that sort of validate their wild opinion is like, yeah, no, I've read a lot about it. And you're like, oh, what books did you read? Oh, well, there's this like scientist on the internet and he's written loads of books on it. He's written loads of books on it. So what does that mean? He's just published some stuff, self-published some stuff, or got someone to publish it for him. It doesn't mean that the information in it is correct. It's really hard to argue with it. It's very it's a fascination of mine, this whole cult thing. We could talk for hours about it.
I love it. I mean, I seriously, I watch every documentary, every show. It's why I love all the alien shows. It's why I went through it. You know, I think my time in it was pretty short-lived, and I wasn't like gullible enough to like dive all the way into a lot of parts of it that I could have. But so fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, the boxes that we put ourselves in and the way the lengths in which one person will go to make themselves feel special. It's just fascinating. And I want to let people have that. You know, when they feel that special, there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, okay, I get it. Have that. Go be special. It's perfectly good. You've probably never felt that before. We seek for all that validation in external things. We never find that in ourselves. The effort that we put into finding all of that superiority is always in something external, and it's usually in something that's not real. And if they put just a tiny percentage of that into finding that within themselves, God, the world would be a different place. We're always looking for a place to put our faith. Like who's going to take us there?
And structure and discipline and these things that are sort of proven to help us get happier scientifically, meditation, sitting in silence, community, all these things kind of are built into a lot of these cults. Some of them even like I would consider are kind of have culty ways, but have really beneficial sort of results. I think often sort of 12-step programs are a little bit culty. There's like an edge of cultism there, but they just do so much good. They like change people's lives and give them the tools that they need to kind of get back on track and live with purpose. And the internet is just the perfect tool for creating cults and creating division. So seeing where it's going to go is interesting. Whether we'll just sort of culturally get tired of it or whether we'll just keep accelerating. It just feels like we're culturally tired of it already. But I know in the States, it just feels like there's no end to that kind of internet engagement led division.
I feel like there should be a website, like as easy as it is in the United States to just go online and create an LLC. There should just be a website where you can just go start a cult. Like you just have to get, the certification, choose what your deity is, decide, there's so much information out there that exists at this point. It would be so easy to kind of lay it all out. There's so many books and everything.
And that one works really well. That cult that all have to wear the same color. That was really good because it really unifies them visually as well. So we'll do that. Okay. And who's going to be the leader? You.
People like being in cults. It takes so much away from them, like so much responsibility away from them to put the power in someone else's hand. And then people also like drama. I feel like that's why we're here in this world, is to like separate ourselves from the addiction to drama, because all those cults always end in drama. It's 3 of them are sex slaves, and the other one is, doing drugs behind their back. And then there's someone selling shit they're not supposed to, another person stealing all the money.
Yeah, but it's because also they've fallen out of that thing. Like you said, they can't stay in that like bliss forever. So they fall out and they're like, shit, I need some bliss. I'm going to go score some drugs. And then they're like, the leader's like, hey, I could take advantage of this. I'm out of bliss state. Let's just, use the hierarchy for my advantage.
Need 4 more wives.
Yeah, exactly. So circling back, we were talking about Palm Springs, spirituality, and then into becoming a full-time painter. And I'd like to know also when you became a dad, and I'm not sure how those things go around, in which order.
They both came about the same time. When I got out of, when we go way back to Los Angeles, and when I moved out of that amazing house in the hills into the house with the person I met, I was in a relationship with that person for 18 years. So throughout all of the craziness, I was with this one person. And then 2015, we split up. And that was my second major, major breakdown. So it was through that process that that breakdown where I was just completely incapable of doing freelance work. I couldn't. I didn't have the mental capacity to deal with people while I was going through what I was going through. And so I had been wanting to do this for a while anyways. So I just made the jump, and I said, like, this is what I'm doing now. I'm no longer working in advertising. I'm working as an artist. And I had already established myself fairly well. My work was selling. I'd kind of fallen into this weird collectors group of, psychedelic potheads who sold who sold drugs in Colorado and in California through the legalization of marijuana.
And wanted to decorate their new places with art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that was funding my life. And I just was painting and doing that. About 8 months after my breakup, I went through, this is the process. This is the time period within there where I went through that enlightening experience. And then after several months of that, of when I lost it, and then I was chasing, trying to find it again, I spiraled totally out of control into my anxieties. And it really was just destroying me physically and mentally. I probably lost 50 pounds. I was having panic attacks all day. I was sleeping for maybe 2 hours a night. I was afraid to sleep because I thought I was going to die in my sleep. I thought I was just going to stop breathing. I have no idea why, but I was going through all these things, and I literally laid in bed one night and I was just crying. And I said, I need help. And I don't have I would say that my religious or spiritual views on the world are a giant conglomeration of like everything I've ever experienced in my life, from childhood religion to adult conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
There's things that I just think work, and I pull things out and whatever. So I'm laying there in bed, and I just said out loud that I need help and that I need an angel. I need someone to come into my life and help me, because I was kind of stranded. I was in Austin, Texas at this point. I knew hardly anybody. It's not really easy to make friends when you're having panic attacks all day and you're not the best person to be around. Yeah. And then the next day I was chatting on one of the gay chats, and this person hit me up, and he just was really understanding. And he was like, do you want to just go for a walk? And so this person, we just started walking like a few days a week, no pressure, nothing. There was no talk of anything sexual. It wasn't like this is a relationship. They understood that I was like in a bad place, and I felt like I could breathe. It was like what I asked for somehow happened, because the next day this person showed up in my life, and they helped me feel like a human again. And they gave me someone that I could talk to in this city. And what I didn't put together was until about 6 months later was that their handle on this gay chat was Archangel.
Oh, fucking hell.
It was just spelled with a J instead of a G. And I never made that connection. And that like gave me chills, and it was super weird.
Of course. Yeah.
And now I've been in a relationship with this person for 7.5 years.
It's insane.
And yeah,
It's insane.
and it is insane.
Yeah.
And he has a daughter. And that is how I became a father, because she was 6 years old. He had just gotten divorced from his partner, and they were going through that. And he told me, he's like, well, I think she would be really good for you, to help get you out of your head. And I thought, how the fuck is a child going to be really good for me right now?
That's the last thing I need.
Yeah. And so it was so hard at first. I went to a park with them. I lasted maybe a half an hour. I thought I was going to like explode. There was like 5,000 children running in circles around me is what it felt like. They were all talking at the same time, and they were all making noise, and they all had attitudes. And, I sat there and I watched this kid who had been about 5 years old. And he was standing there with his arms crossed next to Beth while she was playing on some toy. And he was looking at her and just giving her attitude, just kind of looking down on her, and said, well, I guess no one else gets to play on this toy because you're playing on it. And it was like this total passive aggressive like bullshit. And I thought, oh God, someone's got a bitchy mommy. I'm just like analyzing all these kids, and I'm looking and that was it. I couldn't do it. I had to leave after that. And so every other weekend when he had Beth, I would spend a little bit more time with him. It'd be like 45 minutes. It'd be like 2 hours. It'd be like 4 hours. And it was like, but she did really slowly help me get out of my head.
Yeah.
It was like the worst thing you can do for anxiety is give into it.
Yeah.
It just reinforces every single thing that gives you anxiety. Anytime you run away from it, anytime you give into it, whatever. So I just made myself sit in it. And I mean, there were literally times when I thought I was going to die. Like I thought my panic attacks were so bad, my arms are going numb, my heart's palpitating, I feel like I'm having a heart attack and a stroke at the same time. I'm, experiencing all these things. And, it was life-changing. And like, here I am 7 years later, and now she lives with us full time.
Yeah.
And, she still teaches me things on a daily basis. There are a lot of times when I really wish I didn't have to learn it right then.
Not now.
Yeah, your experience with your kids is not really on their time, or it's not really on your time. It's on theirs.
Yeah. I have two kids, and definitely. I mean, there was a difficult. So a year and a half ago, my mum passed away, and I think they got me through it. I think they were very good at keeping me in the present moment. Just the sort of joy that young children bring to a household. They bring a lot of other stress, and there was parts where the stress of just kids being kids and the responsibilities of managing them both simultaneously whilst my partner was working or stuff, and I had just sort of gone free full-time artist, so it was like all this other stuff. So there's like financial pressure and grief and pressure from children and stuff, but they just had a way of just keeping me in that day, not thinking too much about the past or the future, just trying to keep me in the mundane tasks that kind of sometimes, or sort of like you submit to them sometimes with younger children, because you're just like, well, I guess I'm not doing any work today. Like once you make that decision, I'm not going to do any work, you're not fighting it anymore, and you're just like, all right, let's watch Peppa Pig for a bit, and then we'll go to the park. And those kinds of things are so normal, they kind of really helped.
And those things go away. That's she was 6 when I met her. She's 14 now. And I miss her being the age of wanting to go to a park.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, because I would really indulge in it, swinging on the swing sets or rolling down a grass hill or, just hanging out with her. And those times, they aren't coming back.
Yeah.
It seemed you're so in the moment when it's happening that you would never even think about it not happening again. And it just happens when you're not paying attention. Yeah, she only wants to hang out with us now when her electronic time is up and she wants to watch television. We were in Austin. We started dating. They moved in with me. I had been painting full time. I hit my first like art wall where I decided I no longer wanted to do that kind of art specifically, but I kept producing it because people wanted it.
Was that the landscapes?
The landscapes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first art studio. It was a shared space with 3 other people. I started getting involved in some local events in Austin and just kind of like learning the ins and outs of how the art world worked. And, it was the first time I'd really been around other artists. I've always been a like solitary person, even when I don't want to be. But I was doing pretty well. I was starting to get settled in Austin. I was feeling good. And then Trey's ex decided that they wanted to move to Albuquerque, and they had custody of Beth at the time, and they were going to take her with them. So we decided to move to Albuquerque in order to stay close to Beth. And it ended up being kind of like the best thing for all of us. I was never really big on Texas in the first place. It's more liberal here. It's kind of Wild West here in Albuquerque. Yeah, there's a higher crime rate, but we have beautiful mountains and we have amazing food, and it's super cheap compared to everywhere else that I've lived. So that allowed me to get my own art space and turn that into like my own gallery and my own art studio. It allowed us through the ventures of NFTs, when there was a market, that gave me the financial stability at the time to purchase our house, and really just like make this place a home. So, been here now for 4 years, and it feels more like home than probably anywhere I've lived.
Can you talk a little bit about the gallery space? So I'm imagining that it's like an open studio that people can walk into and you'll be there working. And then also you're showing your art. Do you put on other artists or group shows, and what are the sort of struggles of that? Because I think every artist is very much has this idea, this romantic idea of being a gallery owner. And I think, like I could just sit and paint all day, and then there's this sort of space that pays for itself. And what are the sort of struggles, the actual real day-to-day things that happen with owning a gallery and running a gallery?
Well, at this point, I'm not really running it as a gallery. It's more like it's my art studio, but it is public facing. It is a storefront. But I'm only open by appointment. And basically, people are coming into my studio and looking at whatever work I have on the walls at that time. I do occasionally throw specific openings where I'll clean everything up and do that. I'm planning on doing that in a few months. But for the first 2 years, I ran it more like an actual gallery. I showed a lot of different artists. I had shows every month. I experimented with all kinds of different ways to present work. I worked with a lot of really amazing artists, but last November, I had 2 artists. It was going to be a 2-person show, and they both ended up having issues where they were unable to get the work shipped to me in time for the opening. So we ended up just doing the shows online. And then December, I had a very similar situation. I ended up doing those shows online. And then in January, I decided, you know what? I just like having the space to myself because it, I forgot how much of a distraction it was
Mm.
from my own work. You're putting so much effort into promoting other artists and to shows and to curating and organizing and being in contact with people, and then just keeping an eye out for new talent and things that you might want to do in the future. I'd like kind of lost myself in the process. I ultimately just got to a space where I was like, I was tired of wrangling artists.
It's interesting, and it's exactly the kind of thing I thought. I was like, yeah, I'd like a gallery, and then I was like, no, because then I'd have to like have people come in, and I'd have to talk to them, and then I'd have to sell them the art. So I'd have to have art that I really believed in. That would be difficult because I'd need to really
You have to
consume.
be there for
And yeah, like
specific
every
hours.
day, yeah.
That's
And
really
then yeah. And then you've got to like consume so much art that's like big part of the job, like consuming art, going to openings, going to that stuff. I don't like going to art openings, networking with people. I hate that shit. And then I was like the space and how much money you would have to make to pay the rent in a big city. It's just like it's a really tough thing. But now you're left with like this public facing studio that is huge from the photos I've seen.
It's only like 1,000 square feet.
That's pretty big.
Well,
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
it's not
not as
tiny, but
yeah,
but
it's
it's
not.
not, it's not like a 3-story building with
No, like a
5,000
old
square feet.
warehouse. Yeah, but it's nice. It gives you the freedom to kind of create multiple pieces at the same time, work on bigger canvases, and then also smaller stuff on tables and stuff. So I think, yeah, it's again, it's a nice route to getting something that's really amazing. You touched on it earlier about NFTs. I think every artist I've spoken to so far has been an NFT artist. Inevitably, we have to kind of talk a little bit about it. I think you I would say like you did extremely well when you entered the space and kind of like dropped your first pieces. I think there was a lot of excitement around your first collection of like characters. Yeah, what would you say? I don't want to like talk too much. I've gone over it a few times about 2021 and the craziness of it all. But, what do you think you've learned from that? What do you think the long-term what do you think about NFT art?
I don't care that much, unfortunately. Um, the whole excitement around NFTs was the fact that there was money being generated and there was a viable way for artists to make money, and have direct access to collectors, which is rare and hard outside of that world. It was really exciting because things were happening. At this point, I have no idea. I have decided that I cannot spend all my time in a place that it doesn't pay off.
Yeah.
Last year I didn't make shit off
Yeah.
NFTs. I
Mhm.
mean, there was like hardly anything. And so this year I've dropped a handful of things. I've made very, very few sales. People in the hype side of NFTs want to be like, well, if you're in it, you're in it. If you're out kind of mentality. But,
Mm.
we have to make a living. If it turns around, then I'll get back in. But I can't spend all my time in there when nothing is really happening. When it comes to the art itself, a lot of it was super overrated. But there was a lot of cool shit happening too. That happens in the fine art world. That happens in real life. There's a lot of artwork that's super overrated. I'm like waiting for something exciting to happen in NFTs again.
I want there to be more energy there. I want there to be more receptive collectors, and I want there to be more excitement around collecting. But I'm not saying it's not there. It's still there. but the people that are excited are not throwing money around. Whereas before,
No.
there was such speculation going on. People were buying things to see if it appreciated in 2 weeks because there was sort of mad attention on NFT art. And people knew, like, people just were buying things to see if they could sell it for more. I mean, that happens with everything, with art, with collectibles, with stocks. That's part of
Yeah.
that's part of how economics sort of happens. And then when you've got like this sort of market that never sleeps, where everything sort of seems to be going up, people ride that wave, and art kind of got carried on that wave. And I think there's a lot of people that have new lives because of that. As you said, it connects people to new collectors and communities. And I think that any sort of connection of artists to getting their work out there to more people is a good thing. It's just on a massive lull.
It also became really unauthentic. It became so much about the hype game and about the way to build your community and about, keeping a positive voice. And it's like, it's just not real. It started off feeling really real. Like, we were in these communities with a lot of people who were from different places and, exchanging ideas, and it was exciting and it was new. And then there became like a pattern to the economy. It felt like that just like ruined everything for me because it wasn't fun anymore. It was like, oh, okay, now here's the rules to be an NFT artist, and you have to follow these rules. And I'm just not good with rules. I don't like for my social media to tell me how many times I'm supposed to post and how I'm supposed to engage and what I'm supposed to do, just so that they can derive and get more interactions and clicks out of it. And that's how NFT started to feel. It started to feel like, okay, you just took all the fun out of it. And I know that was because we all started to become desperate for sales. Whether if you were making $1,000 extra a month and you only made $3,000 a month before that, that's a pretty big fucking deal.
Yeah, right.
And in the first year, 2021, I made like $150,000.
Amazing.
On sales and NFTs. Is that as big as the people that I personally know, people who made millions? That's crazy to me. That's life changing. There are people who hit it and just did amazing things, and awesome for them. It would have been more awesome if it happened for me, but I am quite happy with the way that things worked out. And like I said, it gave me the money to be able to buy my house, and it set me up for a lot of the things that I'm able to do now that I would not have been without that like leg up.
Would you suggest for artists to get involved now?
No, I wouldn't, because it's just so defeating to like put work out and not have any sales. I would just say, always just focus on doing your best work. If there's an opportunity and NFTs start coming back around and you want to jump in or dip your toes, do it. I hate to say it, but I don't know if it has a future. I don't know if it has a future in the way we had seen it. The picture looked forever expandable like 3 years ago. It just looked so enormous. And now it feels considerably smaller. It's not just NFTs, but like everything was focused around Twitter, and Twitter right now sucks for me. I don't know if it's for everybody, but I get no interactions or anything there. And, I'm in all of these chats with friends of mine and people that I like, but I can't go on every morning and still do this good morning bullshit and act like we're still in 2021. It's not the same world.
It's different for everyone. I think you have a career outside. I think a lot of the creators that made NFTs like a very big source of income, they had nowhere else to go. They weren't selling paintings. They didn't have existing collectors, and people were still like they might not be spending as much. I mean, it's kind of unheard of, right? That your painting's going to go up and down in value every 3 or 4 weeks. It's usually a little bit steadier. I think it's such a crazy time looking back, but I am excited to see what happens longer. I'm excited to see what happens longer term, and then, like anyone, I'd love another cycle like that, because why the fuck not? It would be fun as hell. And we've got some experience and some collections there that can do some bits. I'd like to talk about your work more, sort of focusing in on your new work. So historically, your work has been very much like anatomical, lots of sort of references to mortality and death, and then these kind of like these very like free experimental things, but then these really refined, kind of precise kind of examples of very fine painting, and or like very sort of a good eye, a good technique, and then also mixed in with very experimental, and then all composed. And from looking at some of your work, and from learning about your work during 2021, I kind of started to it felt to me like you could produce work extremely quickly, and it just flows out of you. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
I work a lot. and I do produce things pretty quickly. I think a lot of that came from a lot of my years in advertising. It's just like production, understanding how long things take in order to accomplish them. I'm always trying to maximize my time as I get older, especially. I feel like, there's a lyric and that just says, time is the only thing of value that we own. And that always sticks with me, because my time is important and I get to do whatever I want with it. Part of why my work changed so much recently was that I felt like my paintings were taking too much time, and I didn't know where I was going to go with the new paintings. I just knew that for many years I wanted to paint looser, and I wanted to be more experimental, and I didn't want to always refine it to death. I feel like I overworked a lot of my stuff for a long time. I just was tired of it. I had my solo show in Los Angeles in January at the Brand Library, their museum, and it was wonderful. I got to see a lot of old friends. It was a huge event. There was tons of people, but yet I still felt like pretty empty. And I just realized like I didn't really present what I wanted to present. It was kind of like a shallow showing.
So what changed?
Well, I was on the road driving out there and back, and it just, I don't know, something about being on the road by yourself in the car for a long time, and just music and whatever, it just gave me a lot of time to think. I was switching back and forth between audiobooks and music, and I stopped and visited several old friends along the way. One of the audiobooks that I was listening to, I don't remember which one it was. It was something about art, but they were talking about, healing your inner child. And I just hate saying that. but
yeah, it's probably true, but it's just saying those words.
Yeah, totally true.
Yeah.
But it just sounds gross to say it. Yeah. I just was thinking about it, because they were talking about trauma, and and yeah, I have tons of trauma in my childhood, of all these things, and I just felt like I wouldn't even know where to start. And then I just kind of had this little moment with myself where it was like, because it was talking about something about sit down with your inner child and ask them what they need. And that sounds even worse. But I kind of did that with myself, and I just thought, well, yeah, okay, so I have trauma. I have, drug addict parents. I had to be an adult really early on. I had to take care of my brother and sister. I had to, do all these things. But the harshest part was just growing up different and never feeling like there was a representation for you Now it's like it gets better. There's the Trevor campaigns and all these things. There's all sorts of things out there for the world to see for queer people. But in the 80s, when I was growing up, it was it was non-existent. And if it was there, it was, you were like a sidekick, like a comedy, um, on the side, and or you were dying. It was not a very positive thing, and I just wanted to see queer people taking up space in public, just being romantic. It wasn't about sex, it wasn't about eroticism, it wasn't about um there's a million things that already exist as queer representation. But I just thought, well, I don't see just romance. There's a part of me that's like, well, I'll probably change my mind in 6 months and I won't ever want to do anything romantic again. Like maybe in 6 months, it'll just all be fucking. Like, I don't know. It could be a completely different situation. But at the time, that was what I felt like my inner child didn't have. Was that representation. And that representation wasn't just for queer. It was like for all the body shapes, and it was for all the colors, and it was for masculine and feminine, and just a really like inclusive view on the world. So I just decided to try to paint it. I had no idea what I was doing. Like I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't have sketches. I didn't have any ideas. The things that I started with 6 months ago look nothing like what I'm doing now. I don't know if it'll just keep changing and changing and changing. I don't know if I'm at the place where I want to be or what, but I've just like been following the inspiration. The gut feeling you have about stuff. Mine has been really physical. I've had people approach me to do commissions like my old work, and just the thought of it like makes me feel sick. I just have to stick to what I'm doing. I just have to keep going with what I'm doing. I have no idea if there will be any success with it. I don't know how long it'll last. I just, the idea that you're supposed to do one thing and just do it over and over and over for your entire career and get known for that one aesthetic or that one thing, I just can't do it. I'm just not that person. If you are, awesome, but I'm just not. And I think more artists need to know that you don't have to be.
It's still obviously your work. It doesn't feel like so far removed. It's hard as an artist, I think, sometimes to see similarities because you have really approached it in a different way. The subject is different, but I can still see Anthony Hurd here in the paintings from the other paintings that you used to do of skulls and faces and stuff. I still feel like I can definitely like the approach to color, and there's still like this gestural kind of like emotive kind of use of what is now strokes was like lines that were kind of like entangling things. There's still similarities. It must have felt very unusual to put this out as somebody who's associated with the paintings from before. Was there an anxiety in sort of showing this work for the first time because it was a different approach, different subject? How did you feel about like sort of posting about it the first time or telling people about it the first time?
It still feels scary. I mean, it's easier, but at the beginning, it was really, there was a lot of anxiety around it. There was a lot of fear around it. I've always identified as queer. I've always had it in my profile. I've embedded queer themes into a lot of my work, but it's never been as literal as it is now. I had really dreaded negative comments. I had quite a few at the beginning, not by anybody that really is of any importance to me. It's not that big of a deal. I could get over it. It was just opening myself up to a whole new level of intimacy that like I'm not used to. I'm used to kind of like burying my messages in iconography and line work and stories and everything. And this work is much more in your face, obvious.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was scary and it was like really vulnerable.
That you said something before, I think maybe even when we spoke before, where you said this feels authentically me. Is it because you had been sort of producing similar work for a long period of time, then working in this new way had like given yourself this new, like that buzz of like working on new art? If you lose it and it starts to feel like work, are we really expressing ourselves, you know, in the best way? Are we really connecting to that flow state, muse, blah blah blah? Are we sort of going through the motions to produce objects?
I mean, there's part of me already who feels like I'm maybe stuck in, I'm not stuck, but that I could get stuck in this, you know, just like, okay, now all he does is paint guys kissing. and, and I hate the box. It was hard for me to, move away from the old work and into the new work because I had no idea what this new work was going to be. When I started, it was way more abstract. You know, the brushstrokes were much bigger. It was, you know, wet and runny and just really just kind of raw. And there's parts of that that I really love, and there's parts of that that I've moved away from. But I'm just trying to kind of allow myself to do whatever I want at this point instead of feeling like there's something that I need to maintain. Like I need to maintain a style or I need to maintain an aesthetic or any of those things. Now I forgot what the question was, so
I think I put like 20 questions in that one question, but it was it's about being authentically you. And
me something about the vulnerability of it.
And the buzz of like creating new work. It's often I'll like create something that I don't know is going to be a new thing, but I get like something happens and you just start seeing it appearing in your work again, and you're like, it's not purposeful, it's just happening, and you just run with it. And I have like, I think similarly to you, I have a real belief in like follow that, whatever it is. I don't know why I'm making the characters I'm making or working in this way, but it just feels right. Just keep going, because like to not do that it just doesn't feel like creating in a very authentic way. And I've always resonated to like authenticity, and I think similar, you know, punk and very expressive music, angry stuff, like things that are very raw, feel more honest, and honesty in creativity is like super important to me. It's not for everyone. Yeah, I find that like you'll find that there's a spark that happens and then you won't really know why, but you can follow that. And I think, you know, obviously you've done it, but you've done it at like a hyper speed as well, because you produced what seemingly, looking at social media, looks like 400 paintings. I'm sure it's not that many, but it's like, it looks like so many.
It has been a lot. It has been a lot. I do like one a day.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of painting.
It's not that I feel like my old work wasn't authentically me. It's just that it's like totally it's subconscious that I was avoiding doing specific things out of like my own fear or my own inability to like envision what that would look like. And so there were just like these blinders that I wasn't even aware of. I think that the art world in general, we've seen a wide variety of like kind of quirky works take the spotlight recently. And that kind of gave me a little bit of push. It was like, okay, so I can breathe a little bit and everything doesn't have to be perfect, because the like hyper realism and the pop surrealism and all this stuff that had been really popular for the last like 15-20 years, from the lowbrow scenes that have, moved up till now, it seems like there was a lot of focus on technique and details.
Being that you produce so much work and a painting a day, which is incredible, what are your routines around that?
I come into the studio every day from about 10 to 2. My routine changes a little bit because I have to ship things out and package things up and take care of business and emails and a lot of that stuff, which I will do after I leave the studio. But when I come in, I usually just have a stack of canvases already cut up and ready to go. I pin it to the wall. I've kind of evolved over the last few months to the point where I've been doing base layers that are just like a single solid color. And I find that I have this want or need to like really do expressive strokes, or to like almost hit the canvas, or do, it gets a little physical. And I've like fucked a lot of paintings up that way, and had to paint over it. So now what I do is, with this base coat, I just kind of get all that out at the beginning, and it's real drippy and wet and messy and everything. And then I take a towel or paper towels, and I just kind of like smooth it out. It's like erasing the aggression.
It scratches that itch, and then you can move on. And
yeah, it's like I can put the emotion in, and then I kind of like erase it, like ease out of it. And then I'm just kind of left with this neutral palette to work with. And then I sketch on top of that, and I just dive straight into painting.
There's a lot of sort of cactus, or is it cacti?
Cacti.
Is it cacti?
Yes.
Is that just stuff is that just from where you live, or is there some symbolism there, or is there any significance to those?
It's mostly just where I've lived. I've lived in 3 different desert areas at this point. I've just always been inspired by just the weird asymmetrical shapes and things that a lot of cactus can take on. When I think old romance, I think of like country western type environments, or there's something also about queer romance in a southwestern setting to me that is almost comical. And so I just really wanted to play with that. I think that you could easily put a lot of words to the symbolism in it. And I've had a lot of people write to me about it. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because I'm also at the point where I'm like really not trying to overthink what I'm doing. I'm not trying to sit around and make things too smart or perfect, or, I really just go with whatever's happening in the moment.
When do you feel like you're gonna do a major showing of this work?
I don't know.
Don't know.
I have no idea. I had a show scheduled for this September in San Francisco, and I had canceled it earlier this year when I started this work, because I just really wasn't sure where it was going, and I wanted to give the gallery enough time to, reorganize and do that. And so at this point, I don't have any shows scheduled. They've been selling a lot online, so I'm very grateful for that, and it's paying my bills. I'm working with some like local companies. There's this cool little shop that opened up like a couple weeks ago that sells all this like high-end mid-century furniture and like weird old collectibles and shit. So I'm gonna like put some of my paintings in their shop next week.
That sounds like a cool shop. And a nice place for a painting. A nice place for like a colourful painting that kind of, I don't know, that puts it in situ and gets people, able to. I imagine it's intimidating to kind of make, people be intrigued kind of the work, and to make an appointment and come in and stand there while the artists power stance looking at them like, when the fuck are you gonna buy it? No, I'm joking. But yeah, I think it's nice. I put some work in public settings, and I always like the last time I can think of I did it, I put it in a cafe, and I made loads of work for it, and I didn't get anything from it, and I was really upset. And then 7 months later, somebody out of the blue just messages me on Instagram. I saw this painting on your Instagram and I'd like to buy it. And I was like, how did you find out about my work? Just I was having a coffee in central London and I saw this, your exhibition. So you never really know. You never really know who's going to see that.
Yeah, with this new work, it's kind of a clean slate for me. I've felt because I lowered my prices. Because it was so experimental. I can't develop a career on a certain type of work and pricing based on something that took me considerably more time and effort and and all that, and then completely change everything and now whip out paintings in 3 hours. I don't know. I know it's not really your time that equates the value of art, but I just felt like I was starting from such a different place that I wanted to make it more affordable while I'm developing the ideas.
In terms of the new work, I'm really excited to see where it goes. I'm enjoying it. It's sort of, I'm engaging with the posts, so it means I see more of it, which is awesome, and it's giving me it's making me feel like I'm not producing enough work because I'm seeing new work all the time. And I'm like, how many paintings is this? How many paintings have you done? I think you're a very open, you're vulnerable in the best way possible. You tell it how it is. You are not afraid to kind of say the wrong thing. And in that are very authentic and present yourself in a very authentic way in social media, which I think is really important. It's easy to get behind a change in direction where it comes from just I'm somebody that's living the artistic sort of path in, I think, the best way possible, creating work that is for them, that feels right, that their gut is telling them is the right thing to do, and just turning up all the time and consistently working towards that, and not worrying about where's that going to go. It's almost like with the new work, you're almost sort of starting again in a lot of ways. And I think it requires a lot of bravery. You're empowering a lot of people, and you are being that representation that your inner child was seeking. So I think hats off to you. I'm excited to see where it goes. And yeah, thank you so much for spending a large portion of your day chatting to me. I hope we can talk again, maybe delve into some more cults and conspiracy theories. Yeah. Where's the best place if somebody wanted to check out your work, buy work? What's the best place to find you online?
My Instagram is the most active place, so just at Anthony Hurd on Instagram is the best place, and then any links you need, you will find there.
Okay, well, I'll put that in the show notes, and anything else that kind of directs people to the work we've been talking about. Yeah, thank you very much for spending the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to follow our guests on whichever social media platform you enjoy using most. Links are in the usual places. Links to all my social media accounts can also be found at the bottom of every single page over on my website at danielcrossan.com. The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please leave a review and even consider sharing the podcast with a friend. Special thanks goes to Low Fox for producing the music for the podcast. Thank you very much again for listening. See you next time. Take care.